Ciao a tutti, it's Arom and welcome to my TED Talk about Constellar Artifact. Its strengths, its weaknesses, it's a deck profile, but I'm gonna be very in depth with my ratios, what you can play instead, my reasoning behind this not quite standard list. And yeah, if this video doesn't turn out at least 40 minutes long, you will not see it. I will scrap it and record it in a month. So yeah. Yeah, hopefully I get this done first take. But yeah, let's get into it. Starting off with the main deck. If you don't know, I've been on a bit of topping spree with this deck, and it is my favorite deck of the format. But not entirely sure why. I just like how simple it is, yet how much you have to think for the few important plays that you make. Because mechanically, it's quite simple. You just make fives, sometimes make fours. But what you do with those fives and which five you summon, when to use the effect, what to target, is not quite so simple. So, starting off with our Constellar monsters, we are running 3 copies of Chaos, 3 copies of Pollux, 3 copies of Algeri, and 1 copy of Sombre. Chaos is the rank 5 enabler of the deck. It's also big warrior, so you can search it by tanky. Gets quite big under tanky, but it's one of the most important cards of the deck, but sometimes you do set it out. Mainly versus Mermels. When I talk about setting in and out stuff, I'm mainly talking about Artifact Traprix, Girgia, Mermel, and Spellbook because those are the more important decks. But for besides that, I will be speaking in general terms, so you can kind of make more informed siding for other decks. But Chaos, great card to main deck, but versus Mermels, 5s are not as important, so I tend to side one out and side out two tankies. Pollux, this guy is permanent, never set him out for anything. 3 copies of Algeri. He is a lot better when you're going first than when you're going second. So sometimes, pretty often I side 1 or 2 out when I'm going second. The main exception is Mermels, because I always want to make rank 4, so I really want Valor. The last spot is Sombre. Why I am playing only 1 is because the way I'm playing this build is I am entirely focused on the first 8 turns. Afterwards, I don't care, because I am already at a big disadvantage versus any deck, even if I build this deck for the grind game. So just not worrying about it and worrying about having the most powerful deck possible in the first 8 turns is better in my opinion. Besides, sometimes you just winning grind. even with just one Sombre, you don't need to top deck it to win often. Sometimes you're just praying for the Sombre top deck. You can play 2. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and honestly, you can even side the second one if for matchups where you fear going into grind game. But yeah, 1 has worked out just fine for me personally, and also when you play 2, it's a pretty easy side out. The second one, in my opinion. It's kind of why I cut it in the first place. When I tried to play 2, I noticed that I would just set it out every single time, so I just cut the second one. Now with the artifacts, we are running, of course, Moral Attack. This card saves versus everything except I like to side 1 out versus Gilgias. Personally, because we are setting Scythe, and Moral Attack is not very strong versus Gilgias. So Scythe is like sometimes better. So I would rather have a 2 and 1 versus Gergias than 3 moral attacks, or 3 moral attacks on one side. And also I am only playing one big attack because of the same reason as Sombre. I'm not worried about the grind game. So like one of the main reasons why you play two big attacks is you don't want to dead draw into Ignition and Sanctum, because if you run out of targets, they are just bluffs at that point. But yeah, it is sometimes good to draw, but the main reason I only run one is that when you are trying to optimize the first 8 turns, you are only working with like 8 to 9 cards, and you don't want any dead cards if possible, but you want the least amount of dead cards possible, and Big Attack is one of the most likely cards in the deck to be dead. Same goes with Sombre, just very likely to be dead. You need it in combination with other cards to do anything. So yeah, obviously sometimes you play and you wish you had a second Big Attack, but you get over it. Or you play 2. I don't think playing 2 is wrong necessarily. I just prefer 1. So that's the monster lineup. I'm not playing hand traps. The reason why is because versus a lot of decks, they are going to be stuck in the hand for a bit, and I don't want that. I want to play. I want to be able to play all my cards immediately, basically. 4 spells, which is the vast majority of the deck. We are running 3 copies of Tenki and 1 copy of Rota. Rota, you never set out. Tenki, I actually do set it out versus artifact decks. Because going first, it's a fine card, but rank 5s are not super impactful anyways. Going second, it is quite a liability. Because, it gives them a free Ignition, a free Double Cyclone, a free way to use the artifacts to remain phase when they previously would have had to be stuck using them in the end phase. And I don't want to take those chances. But besides that, and also versus Mermels, it's decent to set out. I set out a couple. But besides that, when it is in a good matchup, Tenki is one of the best cards in the deck because it's a continuous spell that searches, which means that you can bounce it with Pleiades. So a common play is like if you open, say, Pollux, Algiedi, and Tenki. You go turn 1, Algiedi, Tenki, search Chaos. Chaos, summon it with Algiedi. You go Algiedi first because it's less. It's a lot weaker to interruptions, so I would rather risk giving the opponent a draw 2 with Maxi than risk it getting Breakthrough skilled on turn 3. So, yeah, anyways, GSP special summon Chaos, you make play this, and then you bounce the Tenki, and then next turn you can search another Chaos and make Pollux. Another neat play you can make is that happened recently, is like you can, if you have Tsukuyomi up and you draw into Tenki, you can activate Tenki, search Chaos, and then assuming you can make rank 5, you can search you can summon Pleiades, bounce back the Tenki, and then either discard the Tenki or a second Chaos that you search off of it, and that gives you some combos with the deck. But yeah, Tenki quite strong. The another weakness kinda is it makes you weak to Ragnar Zero, but you're not like super weak to it. So it's like you wouldn't make Ragnar Zero versus Constellars going blind second. You just make it if they bounced back the Tenki and you know it's coming. So in that situation, Ragnar Zero is strong versus the deck. Besides that, it's mostly not very relevant. After that, I am playing 3 copies of Instant Fusion. Absolutely great card, especially when you're going second. When you go first, it's pretty easy side out. I usually side out 1 or 2 when I'm going first. Except versus Mermels, for the same reason that I don't side out Algiri. I want to make force versus Mermels. So, and it's also kind of weak versus spellbooks because it's not a monster that I can just use to attack. But Instant Fusion is a great extender for the deck. It's not weak to Breakthrough Skill. It's not really weak to traps in general. So I think it's a pretty fantastic card. The main issue with it is, there's no level 4 Light Fusion, which sucks hard. But yeah, can't really do anything about that. Gotta live with it. Then 3 copies of Upstart. Kind of sucks that I have to play it because otherwise the deck is kind of breaky, and you can tell games 2 and 3 when you pretty much always side out the Upstart. But I'll get into that later. But yeah, it kind of sucks because there are pre-planned OTKs that deal 8k damage, and you cannot do them with Upstart, obviously. But you get what you get, I guess. Then for our artifact stuff, we are playing 3 copies of Ignition and 3 copies of Double Cyclone. I have played MST previously, and it's fine. But now I am instead playing 3 copies of Forbidden Lance because MSTing into an artifact feels bad. So yeah, Lance is a lot stronger, even if it's less consistent than a third MST. But okay, why am I playing 3 Double Cyclone, especially when I'm only playing 4 artifacts? Because okay, sometimes you side it out if you're going second, but in general, yeah, it is slower and sometimes dead than MST. However, it's just so much more powerful when it resolves. So yeah, and it's not like breaky in the sense of like Chain Whirlwind, where it can actually be completely dead for a long time. At the worst, Double Cyclone is not. You just wait a little bit until it's not a minus to use it. So I think it's a very solid trade-off, frankly. Then to round off the spell lineup, I am playing 2 Soul Charge. It's Soul Charge. Sometimes I do side a copy out, but it is still a very, very strong card. Can't really say anything about Soul Charge. It's Soul Charge. But forgot to mention about Lance. It's an incredible card going second. Going first, sometimes you side it out. But yeah, a very strong thing you can do with this deck is Exiton into Lance and destroy everything. And just set your artifacts and, you kind of win from there. Yeah. Going into the traps, very simple lineup. 3 copies of Sanctum and 2 copies of Call of the Haunted. If you have noticed a trend with this deck is that I am not running much of any techs, really. That is because Constellars are a bricky mess otherwise. Yeah, like people usually play bottomless, warning, breakthrough, vanities sometimes. I used to play it. Sometimes even Compulse and Torrential, which I don't think are very good in this deck. But yeah, no, I wouldn't bother with any of those, frankly. Mainly because you are already in a very good position when you're going first. When you're going second, you're just trying to play. I don't want cards that I have to set turn 2 and not giving plays like the artifacts do. I don't want to have cards that, unlike my engine cards, can brick me in multiple copies unless they are doing proactive stuff like Lance. I just don't think it's very good. And most of the traps that people play are like kinda pointless. Like mainly, I'm talking mainly about bottomless torrential and compulse. Those are removal traps in a deck where monster removal is what you are absolutely best at. Like nobody does it as well as you do, at least on turn on the early turns. Later on, Madolce wins that round, but you don't need extra monster removal. That's why, like, if you wanted to play any traps, I would only really bother with Solemn Warning and Breakthrough Skill, because those cover blind spots in your deck. So yeah, Vanity is pretty win more. Chain Whirlwind, it is very breaky in my opinion. I played it, I topped with it, but I did not have a great time with it. Not in the main deck at least. But yeah, Sanctum obviously best card in the deck. Cove Daunted. If the opponent has a lot of MSTs, maybe sometimes I just set it out. Maybe one, maybe two, kind of depends. Yeah. Going into the extra deck, there's 14 slots that I am completely sure of, that I don't think I will ever change again. I say 14. Well, the first two will be the instant fusion targets. You need a level 5 and you need a level 4. I am playing Ojama Knight and Marvelous. Ojama Knight gets under bottomless. Is not the worst possible thing you can end on if you get max seed on a soul charge, and that's why I'm playing it. But you could be playing the other level 5 lights, Guilty ADD Knight and Musician King. One is a warrior, one is a spellcaster. They come up in the extremely niche situations where you are under rivalry after you got a level 5 Pollux for Guiltia or Algiedi for Musician King. And frankly, besides the fact that you often side out Algiedi, you don't play any rank 5 spellcaster, so that's pointless. You do play rank 5 warrior though, him. So Guilty Knight is a little bit more relevant if you wanted to play a third instant fusion target. That's what I would play personally. Yeah. For the level 4 slot, I am playing Marvelous because there's no real point in either or Camion Wizard. They're pretty much the same card in this deck. Neither have synergy besides bottomless. Carbonella, has the synergy of being a warrior, but there's not any rank 4 warriors that we are running. So yeah, and getting under bottomless is very strong because like often you just normal summon a dude, wait if they have a response. Okay, I can summon another dude and then I can summon 101 or Exiton if they didn't do anything. So yeah, that's first two slots, instant fusion targets. Then we are playing our rank 5s. 2 copies of Pleiades. 2 comes up. Sometimes even 3 comes up, but there's no room for the third, really. But it is the main win con of the deck. Versus most decks. Versus some decks, it's not good, especially early game. Versus Mermels, it kind of sucks compared to the other. Which is why, like, honestly, scouting is really strong in this deck because knowing if you're going versus Mermels is a giant advantage because, ending on Pleiades pass with Pleiades and Moral Attack pass versus Mermel is kind of pathetic because they can just normal summon Undine and out the Pleiades, and like, well, that's such a huge minus. Dweller plus a Moral Attack, unless they have Breakthrough Skill, you vote 1, and if they have Breakthrough Skill, you're still in a very good position. Or, weird Soul Charge plays with like Megalo and such. Yeah. Besides that, It's also quite weak versus Artifact Trap Tricks in the early game. It is a lot better in the late game and mid game, because like once they are starved for resources, Pleiades is really strong versus Cat. Before then, yeah, not so much. Not really doing much of anything. The most damage you're doing, frankly, is if they start popping their own back rows, you just bounce the back row in chain and hope they don't have another MST to chain. So yeah. Besides that, there's it's like extremely strong versus Girgias. It's good versus spellbooks. It's strong versus mythic rulers, but not like amazing. But it's still the best card to make versus them. Versus any normal summon reliant deck, it's so fucking broken. Roches, Bujins, Lightstone Ruler, broken. It's broken versus Infernities, if you can get it to stick, because if you go first, because they cannot play with a hand. So if you bounce a monster of theirs after they've run out of ways to get rid of their hands, they have lost. So yeah. Besides that, it's very strong with Tanky and Call of the Haunted. You bounce them back and can be a really scummy play. Obviously, if you open with Tanky and you make Pleiades, you don't always bounce back the Tanky. Like if you have another Chaos, don't. If you have a full artifact play, probably best if you don't. Like if you have a big old tech combo, because you're already gonna have 2 level 5s. Pretty much you bounce it if you predict that next turn you will have an uneven number of level 5s on the board, so you get value of Chaos. And yeah, Call of the Haunted bounced by Pleiades is such a scummy play. It's so strong. A funny thing you can do is like if you're desperate with Soul Charge, you can make Pleiades and Exiton, and you don't use Pleiades. You make Pleiades, you make Exiton, then you activate Exiton, and this way they cannot negate it because you just bounce the Exiton away with Pleiades. So yeah. Next up we have M7. I played a tournament without it, I topped it, but that was before I discovered a very funny OTK we can do with it. Besides that, it's can be strong versus some decks. Mythic, Mermel, those decks can make big monsters, and making a 2700 can be quite strong. Besides that, the fact that it has an effect is not too relevant because it usually doesn't live to see that. Yeah, I definitely think it's worth running, if only for the OTK. Speaking of OTK, we have Gaia Dragon, Volcasaurus, and Shark Fortress. Volcasaurus is pretty self-explanatory, and sometimes you actually don't want to pop with Moral Attack. You prefer to leave them with a monster on board so you can pop with Volcasaurus. But to be honest, I did that mostly before I started running Shark Fortress. And Shark Fortress lets you do the very funny OTK I mentioned. Basically, if you have Pleiades without materials anymore on board and 2 level 5s, you make Shark Fortress, you make M7. Shark Fortress effect, target M7, that's 5400 damage. And then you stack Gaia Charger on top of Shark Fortress, and that's another 2600. 26 plus 54 is 8k. So yeah, that's a game. And with those cards, you are trying to win as soon as possible. Trying to sometimes even turn 3, but like the main goal is turn 5 to where you want to win. But yeah, really amazing cards. And to round off the rank 5s, we are running 1 Tiras and 1 Durandal. These cards, Tiras is mainly for Cat. It comes up like almost every game versus Cat. It's so fucking good. Durandal, it's hard to explain when it comes up, but when you start, when you get into the mid game, you start thinking about what they have said, and you realize that the play this is not very safe. Durandal is, because you can negate normal traps. And besides that, sometimes you know that if they top decking to Soul Charge, they win. Pleiades cannot do anything about that, but Durandal can. So Durandal comes up mainly in those situations, but it's a very variable thing. And another situation in which it comes up is like if you can make a 5 and the rest of your hand is shit and you just want to shuffle it all back. And unlike with Tsukuyomi, you also get a negate out of that. Not just the draw aspect of it. But yeah, speaking of Tsukuyomi, we are running one copy of Bujintei Tsukuyomi. One of the best cards to go into turn 1. It's not just a draw 2, it's a draw 4, because 90% of the time it leaves to turn 3. It sucks when it gets mind controlled away, but it's worth it, frankly. Yeah. If you open, if you cannot open Chaos, you make Tsukuyomi. Sometimes if you can open Chaos, you make Tsukuyomi because your hand sucks otherwise. But the strongest plays you can make with it is like when you have Pollux, Algidi, Chaos, and Soul Charge, and you can make Tsukuyomi, draw 2, and then make Pleiades. Those are pretty insane turn 1s. Besides that, I'm just running the best rank 4s in number 101 Silent Honor Arc, Exciton Knight, and Dweller. These cards are amazing. There's really nothing to say, frankly, at least about 101. It's 101. If you have played that format, you know when it comes up, when you just want to use it for the effect, when you just want to hard summon it. If you don't, you'll learn. Exciton, again, we are main decking Glance, so the card is amazing for that. Besides that, it's Exciton. You just run it. If you can make it, you probably run it. Dweller versus Mermal, it's amazing. Wins the games. Versus Cat, in the early game, it might be better than Pleiades, frankly. Turn 1. I'm still undecided about what I prefer to play. But, they can only out it with Dionia, and after that, they need Sanctum, or you just stop all their artifact plays. So, they have 5 outs to Dweller, and, they can dig into them with Duality, but, besides that, if you have Dweller and a bunch of artifacts, you might be in a very good spot, because they cannot use their artifact plays to get over your artifacts. Also, it lets you safely bind MST into artifacts, which is very good. Especially, turn 2, you want to blind MST into them, into their end phase, but you might hit a Sanctum or an Ignition that might be very annoying. So that's layers of safety. But yeah, these are the 14 cards that I would never cut personally myself, and I would strongly advise you not to cut them either. But the 15 card, I still have not decided on what I like. So here I'm just gonna go through some suggestions. The first two, which I have been running the most recently, Giant Hand and number 80. Giant Hand is in here because with 3 copies of Instant Fusion, you don't really want to save it for the next few turns, especially if you draw 2. So you would rather have a rank 4 play that is good versus every deck, because not versus every deck Dweller is good. And sometimes otherwise the alternative is 101 if you're kind of forced into making a rank 4 turn 1 versus a deck that's not Dweller weak. So Giant Hand comes up in that situation. Rhapsody is because Mythic Ruler is a pretty bad matchup otherwise, and Felgrand in general is hard to out, so Rhapsody helps you with that. yeah, those are the two that I would consider most when building the deck. Besides that, there's a couple of rank 5s that you could be playing. One is Wind Up Carriers Arsenal Zemayo, because mainly of the Georgia matchup, but other controls decks it can be fine versus. Well, meanwhile, number 12. If you've never read the card, that's fine. It's a 2400 warrior. It says once per turn, during either player's turn, you can detach an exclusive material from this card. During this turn, every ninja monster face up you control can't be destroyed by battle or by card effect. Which means this card is fucking great versus Cat. In my opinion, turn 1, this is a better card to make than either Tiras or Pleiades. Especially versus Hat, but versus Cat, the fact that Tiras runs out of materials means that, it's only strong until turn 3, and, you've wasted 2 turns of it already, so it's only strong versus in turn 3. And, you kind of want to save it for later because Tiras is so amazing versus Cat, so, Ninja is really strong if you're really worried about the Artifact Trap Tricks matchup. Besides that, for other rank 4s, a lot of you might be surprised that I'm not playing Omega. More like Constellar Pepega. No, yeah, but, Omega is good. It's good. There's just no room for it. Same goes with Paladinamo. It's a good card. There's just no room for it. But Omega is kind of the 17th card I would consider running. Because, it's good versus Geargias and backward decks in general. Besides Artifact Trap Tricks. Then we have Diamond Direwolf, which seems a bit random until you realize that Exiton Knight is light and it cannot out Light Imprisoning Mirror, and Diamond Direwolf can. The main issue with that is that one Light Imprisoning Mirror is not super duper common because a lot of decks run light monsters. But the main issue is that, if you are in the position to make Diamond Direwolf, you're already losing. Because you've wasted so many resources to make it. So yeah, it's kind of losing bet to run it. But, I ran it before, I topped with it. Just never came up in that situation, in that tournament. Lavalval Chain, you might be saying, what the fuck, why? The reason is Soul Charge. If you open sometimes, or Call of the Haunted, sometimes it's can be a little bit better than Tsukuyomi because you can dump a monster. Like if you open Chaos Algiedi Pollux, so 2 level 4s and Soul Charge, it's without other monsters, or mainly without Chaos, it's better than Tsukuyomi if you want to make Pleiades and not draw 2, because you can send Chaos and make rank 5 that way, Soul Charge. Or you can dump an artifact with Call of the Haunted, mainly big attack if you're bricked with Call of the Haunted plus moral tax, Oh, very niche, but we're just talking niche cards right now. Things you might want to know about. Last but not least, Cowboy, because it can help you make a couple of OTKs, I guess. And it's also a warrior, so you can make it with double Pollux under Rivalry. Yeah. I will be talking about weaknesses of the deck and good matchups in a separate recording. Before we get into that, we have the side deck. Scythe. Okay, so if you are a Hut player, you are going to be asking, what the fuck, why are you playing Scythe? That card is so bad. If you are a Mother player, you are asking, what the fuck, why are you siding Scythe? Why aren't you manning it? Okay, so Scythe doesn't see play in Hat and in Artifact Trap Tricks variants because the one turn of Scythe is not very relevant, and most of the time Moral Attack just gives you better value because it actually gives you a plus. Meanwhile, Scythe doesn't really. But with this deck versus some decks, you are pretty much good with more attack with their monsters as long as they don't get to their extra decks. And even if they have monsters, we can easily get rid of them with rank 5s. And they even sometimes take advantage of that with them with Volcasaurus. So like overall, Scythe is very good versus combo decks, versus Mythics, and versus Geargias, moral attack is pretty mediocre. So I often side out one moral attack for the Scythe. And versus Artifact Traptrix, I actually like to side in the Scythe because 2200 is bigger than 2100, and 2100 is the easiest, is what they usually end on, like unless they go into the rank 5s. Both Moral Attack and 101 are 2100, so side being bigger than them is pretty huge. Early game you want to use the Moral Attacks to pop their own Moral Attacks, but once they no longer have easy Moral Attacks to use, Scythe comes in and just is big and strong, and it's really, really nice, honestly. So yeah. Then 3 Max and 3 Crow. Nothing really here to say besides why I don't main Maxi. It's too slow. Versus a lot of decks, it's just way too slow of an upstart, and I want to win fast with this deck, so I don't want to it in the main deck. Then for side deck, then for back row hate, we are playing 2 MSTs and 1 Chain Whirlwind. Chain Whirlwind is a good card, but you need to see it with some other MST or Sanctum. So I don't feel comfortable siding multiple Chain Whirlwinds when I'm only maining 6 MSTs because of the lances. So I would rather side 2 other MSTs and 1 Chain Whirlwind. And besides that, Chain Whirlwind is amazing when you go first, but you don't really want to side it when going second usually. So I feel like just 2 MSTs and 1 Chain Whirlwind is the better ratio. Then we have 3 copies of the Bunk, kinda the MVP of the side deck really. Pretty much we always want to side 3 copies of the Bunk. Doesn't really matter versus what it is, as long as they have like 1 target, you're good. You're trying. It's mostly to counter hand traps, because like we don't particularly care about Max C, but and Schoolmeister is like okay, but we mostly really want to counter Crow, Cycle Reader, and Vader. Mostly Crow and Cycle Reader because even if we go, it doesn't really matter when we go first or second, though we can always hit Crow and Cycle Reader. Vader and Flying C, usually it's just whether they draw it later on or if they open it. But yeah. And then 2 copies of Breaker Skill. For all my tops, I played Chalice, but I think I'm going to be playing Breaker Skill going forward because the reason I played Chalice is for going second versus artifacts. But I've noticed that I've played 3 matches versus Artifact Traptrix, and every single one of them I went into grind game, and I went into grind game, but Breaker Skill would have been fucking great. So like Chalice is amazing turn 2. Besides that, Breakthrough is just gives you a lot of value if you get into grand game versus Artifact Traptrix. So this is my current side deck, and I'm gonna show you some other side deck cards you might want to consider, because I have considered them. Valor, because the main deck is not built for combo decks. It's pretty much just ignoring the existence of combo decks. So, Valor gives you a hand versus combo decks. 2 Flying C. 2 Flying C. Even 3. Flying C is... I only have 2. But, Flying C is... this is, alongside Sylvans, one of the decks that can bounce Flying Sea, so it's really strong in this deck. The main issue is that there's not a lot of things that I would side this against. It's like the Mirror and Infernities. Those are kind of the two decks that kind of auto lose to Flying Sea without some drawing some specific cards. Like in this deck, you need to draw an artifact to tribute summon, and it's not quick at all. Meanwhile, with Infernities, it's Chalice. Speaking of, yeah, Chalice again, good card. And I don't know why I put this in. Solemn Warning because again, it covers a blind spot that you have, and it's really strong when you go first. But I don't think it's particularly worth the set slot. And there's also Rhapsody. It's an extra deck card, but the extra deck is super fucking tight. It's tighter than the side deck, so you might want to consider siding Rhapsody if you don't want to have a really bad time versus Mythic Ruler. So yeah. Speaking of, anyways, speak about weaknesses and strengths of the deck. Well, the main weakness is the deck doesn't generate advantage, really. You get your +1 with Tanky, technically. It's not really technically, because with play this you bounce it and it's actually really good, but you have +1 with Tanky, with Moral Attack, with Ignition. Those are like +1s, but realistically, it's like the issue is that you don't gain your own advantage. You just interrupt your opponent. So that's a pretty big issue with the deck. It's entirely hand reliant. It's like Cat, except Cat has a card car, which is a +1. Mermelio, which is a +1. Even if both decks just kind of do whatever with the hand they have, they can't really. They're not toolbox decks at all. They just kind of do whatever, and then they have the extra deck as toolbox, but they cannot really search out their engine much. Artifact Traptrix has a lot more pluses, but the main advantage of Constellars versus Artifact Traptrix is it's a lot faster at killing, at making plays, kind of everything, really. Another big advantage is consistency. The reason we don't play all of the traps that Artifact Traptrix can play is because Artifact Traptrix doesn't rely on opening its combos. You can just slowly draw into your artifact combos and just keep rolling with the card cards and Traptrixes. And with this deck, you really need to see either a Constellar combo or an artifact combo to play. And having streamlined the deck, it's still it is now about as consistent as Artifact Traptrix, but when you brick, you are a lot worse off than Artifact Traptrix, because at least they have traps to stall out until they unbrick. We don't really have that. Then the main strength of the deck is that it kind of beats every engine except Mythic Ruler and except combo decks when going second. Because with the caveat of Mermels, you have to know them in advance, because versus everything else besides maybe just you versus Georgias, you just bounce their sets, and play this is bigger than Georgian attacks. Versus Infinity, you just bounce whatever they have and bounce a monster once they cannot get rid of stuff anymore, and they have you turn off their board. Versus Sylvans, you bounce their Lone Fire. Versus Madolche, you bounce their bounce or pop with more like their normal summon. Yamato, same thing. Lightsworn Ruler, same thing. There's a lot of decks that just they really lose hard to play this and moral attack. Versus Artifact Traptrix is play this is really strong in the late game when you're in the grind game, but early game it's kind of weak. But yeah, like Mythic Rulers, it's kind of weird because like Azure Eyes is really strong versus this deck, and they have Blaster and Tidal to just free big beaters that you have to use your Pleiades on really. But usually you are not losing to the opponent's engine. You are losing to the opponent's non-engine. So, Breakthrough Skill, really big in the main deck. For side deck cards, Crow is really annoying. Cycle Reader is deadly. Flank Seas, auto lose. Your back row in general, really annoying. So you're really trying to kill their non-engine with your back row hit and the banks. But if you don't draw them, you are kind of forced to play slowly, and this deck can do that sometimes versus mainly versus Artifact Traptrix, because again they don't generate too much advantage, but versus Girgias you give them a turn, you give them everything. So you cannot really go second versus Girgias without going fast, and usually Girgias F4, so you can't really do that, which is kind of a big issue. At least in theory, for some reason I've yet to go second versus Girgias, frankly, so I'm not entirely sure. But I think I can kind of predict how going second versus Girgia works out. Yeah. Besides that, matchup spread, versus Artifact Traptrix, it's supposed to be a bad matchup. I've won three matches in a row in a tournament versus not the greatest players though, so I'm still leaning on it's a bad matchup probably. Girgias 50-50, depends on it's an RPS matchup really, depends on who goes first. Mermels depends. If you go second, you're fine. If you go first, depends on whether you're facing Mermels already and you go into into Dweller, or you don't know and you go into Pleiades and you lose because of that. Versus Spellbooks, really strong. You realistically shouldn't lose it unless you seriously break. Bujins, really strong, but I just in the 3v3 we just got beat really badly twice by Bujins, so that's really embarrassing. But the first match they got really lucky. The second match we got really unlucky. So can't really win them all, but in theory Bujin is a very strong matchup because you can just stop Yamato normal summon, bounce it, whatever. You just win from there, and they can't really. Hair protects from artifacts. Turtle protects from Pleiades target, but they cannot protect from both at the same time. So kind of flanking them. Versus Sylvan's really tough matchup because of flank C mainly, because they have it really. And besides that, going second versus them is very annoying if they get a floodgate. We can't really deal with rivalry, so unless we draw multiple back row hit because of Stardust, it's really annoying. But if we go first, we're good unless they have flank C in the side deck. Then Heroic Rulers kind of annoying because going second they have Technuit, which we cannot bounce, so that's a bit a little bit of an issue, but besides that, the deck is fine matchup. We can just hit a ton. Mythic Rulers again, 100% make sure they don't go into Azurize. Site is good. There is it's really hard to win if we go into the grind game. You really want to have a very strong hand and have a lot of negates ready to win versus Mythic Rulers, because it's not pretty. It's not a good matchup. Loaches is a normal summon reliant deck, which we just stop them for a couple of turns and win from there. So not really a big issue. Same with Lightsword Ruler, they are really normal summon reliant. So Evil Swarms, depends on the hand, because some hands are really artifact heavy, some hands are really Constellar heavy. So obviously versus Evil Swarms you want Constellar heavy hands. But a neat thing about the Evil Swarm and also Spellbook matchup is they have archetypal lances, but lance does those archetypal lances do absolutely nothing versus us. And we like to keep it that way, especially since they usually don't set it out. So yeah. Anything else I'm missing? I don't think so. Fire Fists, good matchup unless they get really, really lucky. But they have a lot. If they are playing like Fire Tricks, they have a lot of traps, so they can grind out like that. So it's not a given or anything. So yeah, that's it from me. I've talked on for long enough. Leave a like, join the Discord, leave a comment, subscribe, all the shit, and goodbye.